We might have seen these plants on Instagram, on Facebook, on Pinterest, or on other social media platforms. And the moment you might have seen them, you might have been in awe that these are such beautiful plants and I want to add them in my garden or in my collection. We are very curious to know when something we see online is very beautiful, very pretty. We definitely want to have them in our house, even though we do not have a lot of knowledge about them. And a lot of times we go ahead and purchase the succulent. A lot of times they do not come as per our requirements, or a lot of times after having them, they don't turn out to look like the way they are on Instagram or on Facebook or on other social media platforms. And that is what we are going to be talking in this video. Hi guys, welcome to my channel Lush Gardener, and in today's video we are going to be talking about the problems that occur with succulents. It's not always necessary that things are going to go as per your plan. We all have an imagination in our mind about succulents and we want our succulents to look perfect, but that's not going to be the case every time. But there is always going to be something that's going to come up. Maybe that could be related with watering, with temperature, with the light, with the soil, or with environment in general. So let's take with the first topic, and that is related with holes in the leaves. So when you look at this succulent at the first instance, you'll feel like either this succulent was either bitten by a small animal, or probably the birds have affected this succulent. So this was a case that I had recently encountered because one of my subscriber had shared an image wherein a lot of his succulents had a lot of holes like this. So obviously my first question was, do you have any issues with birds? And the person said no. And the person also informed me that this usually happens during the winters. During the summers, this does not happen. So of course we had to check on why exactly is this happening only in one season. So I did a little bit of research, I read a little bit of articles, and then I looked at the succulent once again, and I could see that one of the leaf had a bump, but it did not crack or it did not have a hole, but it had a bump, as you can see on the image. I'm just going to mark it around. Now, why is it happening only during the winters and not during the summers? Because remember guys, during winters the environment is very cool. It takes a little bit more time for the soil to dry. And if you are going to water regularly, how you tend to water during summers, because your watering tends to change during summers and winters. But if you're going to continue to water your succulents the same way how you tend to water during the summers, your succulents will end up with edema. A lot of times the succulents might get overwatered, but in case if they do not get overwatered, they will have edema. Now edema is basically when like there are a lot of cells in each of the succulent leaf. Now when these cells inside the leaf, they tend to take excess moisture or excess water, they can no longer hold it to themselves and they tend to burst. Now when they tend to burst, they tend to leave a bump, as you can see on the screen. This is the bump that tends to show up on the leaves because the cells inside have burst out because of excess water. Now during summers or during monsoons, it's not much of an issue. The bumps will stay like that. It's not going to burst. But this thing usually happens during the winters because the environment is cold. The leaves become a little bit more fragile, and due to which the edema, which is supposed to just stay like a bump, happens to burst. And when it tends to burst, it is going to leave a hole in that leaf over there. So that is exactly what was happening. And my friend's succulent was completely damaged. Every leaf had at least 5 to 6 of these holes. It kind of looked like it was nibbled by an animal, but it was nothing related with an animal. It was related with the watering schedule. Probably the watering was a little bit more. Remember, as I've said, during winters you need to cut down on your watering because the environment is cool. It takes a longer time for the soil to dry, and your watering also has to be reduced a lot as compared to what it was done during summers. You cannot have the same watering schedule what you have been using it for your summers or for your monsoons. You have to keep changing it as per the environment, as per the season. So probably over here the watering was the same what is being done during the summers, due to which the succulents happen to absorb too much of moisture, and due to the winters the edema happened to burst. and that's how it started to leave a lot of holes on the leaves. So be extremely careful. The moment you start noticing that there is edema, try to reduce on your watering. It indicates that you have a very irregular watering schedule. Either you are underwatering your succulents for a longer period of time, and then all of a sudden you are flushing them with a lot of water, due to which the succulents are trying to grasp as much as water in one go, due to which they kind of choke. Like how if we as people tend to have water and we just start to gulp water, we are definitely going to choke and we are going to throw up that water. That's exactly what happens with the succulents as well. The leaves can no longer, the cells in the leaves can no longer hold that water. They have taken excess water than what they should have taken, and that's how they tend to burst. And then further, during winters, these edema spots can burst, leaving a crater or a hole in the leaf. The next issue is cracking or splitting of leaves. Now you might have come across this one-off case wherein you start noticing that the lower leaves of the succulent are starting to crack or split. Now this can happen either on the lower leaves or in the mid level of leaves. Very rare it is going to show up on the crown area, but a majority of the times it's going to be on the lower or on the mid section of the leaves. It's going to be both on the upper side as well as on the lower side of the leaves, as you can see on the image. Now this completely destroys the look of the succulent. A lot of times it doesn't even look very appealing to look at, and I have heard from people that they have trashed their succulent thinking that this is some kind of fungus or some kind of a fungal attack or a mold that is growing on the succulent, due to which they just trash the succulent off. Now remember guys, this is nothing related with any fungal attack or mold or any kind of infection, but this is simply another type of edema. I wouldn't call it edema, but it is somewhere related with that, because over here again the same issue. The succulent has absorbed a lot of water, due to which the leaves are no longer able to hold that water in it. Over here I would say multiple amount of the cells in the leaves are starting to absorb a lot of water, hence the leaf in general itself is not able to hold that water, due to which it starts to crack or it starts to split, and it gives a very bad appearance to the succulent. A lot of beginners might even think that this is something that's going to be very fatal, but actually it is not very fatal. All you have to do is just cut down on your watering, cut back on your watering. Try to keep it in a place where the soil can dry faster. If your soil is taking longer period of time to dry, then probably you'll have to change your soil mix. Go for an earthen pot so that it can pull out the excess moisture. This is very common with people who are from a very humid and moist environment, or for people who have a soil mix that tends to retain moisture for a longer period of time. This is something, or this symptom is something that you are going to see very often. Usually this happens more on echeverias, but again it is not compulsory, or it's not only limited to echeverias. It can happen to any succulent, be it Pachyphytum, Graptovaria, Graptopetalum. A lot of succulents can still manage to get through with edema, but at times they do get affected. So it's not only limited to echeveria. This can happen to any of the succulent. A lot of times it also happens with Pachyphytums as well, because they already have a lot of chubby leaves. They have already stored a lot of water, and then you further go ahead and add in a little bit more water. This is how it's going to happen. The succulent will start to split. But usually it's more common with echeverias because they have very thin leaves. You can see even this echeveria has very thin leaves, which means that it cannot store a lot of water in the leaves. And when there is excess amount of water, remember, succulents do not have the mind of their own. They don't know when exactly to stop absorbing that water. They will continue absorbing that water until it starts getting rotted. But over here, the good part is that the succulent is giving you a second chance of rectifying your mistake of adding in too much of water, or probably the environment is very moist and you're adding too much of water, due to which the succulent is giving you a second chance by showing you a sign that it is getting a lot of water. Please cut down on the watering. If you're still going to go ahead and keep watering this type of succulent, it will definitely get rotted. So be extremely careful. The moment you start seeing that there are cracks appearing or the leaves are starting to get split, this indicates that the succulent or the leaf is absorbing too much of moisture and you need to stop giving water. And the last one, which is crown rot, and this is the most fatal kind of rot, I would say, among the entire history of succulents, because you have root rot, you have stem rot. You can cut it off well in advance if you tend to notice in an early stage. But at any given point of time, you notice that your succulent tends to look like this. When you tend to see that the crown area is turning transparent, it's turning darker in color, there is no going back. It's just matter of couple of hours or probably 24 hours, the entire succulent is going to fall apart. The moment you're going to touch the succulent itself, it will fall apart like a pack of cards. So there is no going back. Once you notice this, your succulent is completely destroyed. And this is something that happens almost 98% to 99% with a lot of beginners. This is crown rot due to overwatering once again. Now, like the previous two cases that we spoke about, edema and the cracking of the leaves, it's absolutely okay. Your succulent still can survive. All you have to do is cut down on the watering. But in this case, you cannot do anything. The succulent is completely gone. It's completely beyond repair. You might not even be able to propagate any of the leaves because they also tend to turn dark at the place where it's supposed to have the leaf growth. That is also going to get affected and the entire plant is gone. So you have to be extremely careful. Plus you can also notice over here there are a lot of pebbles on the upper layer of soil, which means that the person had used it as a top dressing. Now guys, I personally do not use top dressing because my environment, I belong to a tropical environment wherein there's a lot of humidity. There could be a lot of humidity, and for people who are from coastal areas or who are closer to the ocean, please do not use top dressing because top dressing is going to kind of trap the moisture inside the soil. This can lead to crown rot very easily because we want to have a soil mix that tends to dry out fast. We want to have a soil that does not retain moisture. But if you're going to add pebbles, or if you're going to add top dressing, and if you are from a very humid environment, or your soil mix tends to retain moisture, for example, if you're using coco peat in your soil mix and if you're going to use a top dressing, 100% your succulent will get rotted. Your succulent will have a root rot or a crown rot for sure if you're going to have a mix that tends to retain moisture. And above that, if you are going to use top dressing, it is going to trap all the moisture beneath the soil and your succulent will get rotted. Apart from that, if you are a beginner, you won't even get to know when the soil is dry and when the soil is not dry. You might end up watering it, or you might end up watering the soil without the soil getting dried, and that is going to be very fatal. It is going to be a completely mess. So if you are from a place, or if you are a beginner, please do not use top dressing. You might have seen my videos. I do not use top dressing. The reason is because I tend to use garden soil. Garden soil has the capacity to retain a little bit of moisture, and if I'm going to use a top dressing over that garden soil that is present inside the pot will take even more time to dry. So that's the reason why I personally do not use the top dressing, and I do not recommend to a lot of beginners because it can be very tricky. Apart from that, it also tends to restrict the air circulation. It becomes a little difficult and it suffocates the roots. But again, there are people who tend to use top dressing. That is because they are from a very different environment. Their soil mix is very different. A lot of people tend to use soilless media. Now I'm not very sure about what exactly is that media because that soil media is not available in my country. We do not have that type of soil mix. It's usually found in Korea, and a lot of Koreans tend to use top dressing, and it tends to work out really well because they do not have garden soil in their soil mix, or probably they have a very minimum quantity of garden soil, and probably the environment is very dry. The whole purpose of using top dressing for these people is because their soil tends to dry out much faster and they want their succulent to have that little bit of moisture. But if you are from a place wherein you already have a lot of humidity, it takes a lot of time for your soil to dry. Adding of the top dressing is going to further reduce the water getting evaporated from your soil mix and maintaining a little bit of more moisture in the soil, which can lead to a crown rot. And that's what exactly is happening in this picture. As you can see, they have used a lot of pebbles on the upper layer of soil like a top dressing. And I think the pot as well is a ceramic pot, which means you can see it is going to retain moisture. I'm not very sure about what soil has been used in this. Probably it was soil that tends to retain moisture. So the combination of ceramic pot, top dressing, and a mix that tends to retain moisture has caused the crown rot. So you have to be extremely careful. Try to go with an earthen pot if you are from a very humid environment. If you are a beginner, go with a terracotta pot, concrete pot, or any porous pot material, and avoid using any top dressing. this is exactly what's going to happen. A lot of people tend to use it because it looks very beautiful as a decor, but what's the use of adding it when your succulent itself is going to die? So be very careful, go with the right choice. Try to replicate an environment that is very similar for the succulent to grow. In nature, I don't think the succulent is going to have any top dressing in their natural habitat. So try to go with that, give it a good amount of air circulation. Otherwise, you are going to end up with a succulent that has crown rot. And when you have a crown rot, that is completely fatal. You cannot save any part of the succulent. So guys, that's all about it. I hope that this video was helpful to you. If it was, please hit the like button. If you're new to my channel, please consider subscribing to it. Until then, take care, stay safe, and keep planting.